welcome back to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. Their second trial, first trial, ended in a mistrial in 93. This trial ends in a conviction with life without the possibility of parole, which we now know has been overturned. They are going up against the parole board so about a month from now, August 20th and 21st. And also, before that, the DA has to respond to the habeas corpus. So they have multiple paths, as you know, they have multiple paths to freedom, and that is potentially one of them. The DA has to respond to the habeas corpus. The judge in that case has decided that he takes the brothers' evidence as, you know, truthful, credible, and he needs the DA to respond within 30 days. And I believe it will be before the parole hearing. I'm not sure exactly the date. I think it's like the 7th or the 12th, sometime before the parole hearing. So it's in between that time, and we should get an answer on that if they have an answer. It's going to be a bunch of BS, like we know, as Nathan Huckman continues to spew his BS as to why the brothers are dangerous, blah, 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 blah. We've been through all that before. We're not going to go through it again. So this part is the defense's part 5. So we are on the defense's case. The state has completed their case in chief. They will have a rebuttal, but we'll get to that after the defense, obviously. And so right now we're still on the first witness. This is Dr. Martin Fackler, who is a wound ballistics expert. He is the OG wound ballistics expert, and he has basically torn apart the two experts that have testified for the state, meaning Dr. Roger McCarthy, the two main, they're like key experts, Dr. Roger McCarthy and Dr. Robert Lawrence, who Lawrence he did a forensic review of the autopsy. He didn't do the autopsy himself because they didn't call that doctor for some reason. I don't know why. And then we have the Dr. Roger McCarthy, who is what was it? Failure analysis, who did all the drawings, all the diagrams, basically trying to lay out the positioning of the decedents as the shots were taking place. It's basically all speculation, as he's admitted to, Dr. McCarthy has admitted to, and this doctor has shown in his testimony that basically nothing that Roger McCarthy did in those diagrams should be credible. And with that, let's continue on. This is part 5. We are in the middle of, we're in the middle of cross. So this is the middle of cross. We left off last time in the middle of it. There wasn't a break. I made a break because they changed topic and I wanted to go a little longer. So here we are. This is in the middle of cross-examination with Mr. David Kahn for the state doing the questioning. All right, so he says, okay, doctor, getting back to this wound that you described for us earlier, and that is the individual pellet defect to the antecubital fossa of the right forearm, you told us a little while ago there's an exit wound on the back of that arm that is associated with that wound. Is that correct? Ms. Abrams says, objection, argumentative. The court says it's compound. Rephrase the question. Directing your attention to those 6 individual pellet defects on the antecubital fossa on the right forearm. Yes. Is there an exit wound on the back of that arm which corresponds to that entry wound? Multiple exit wounds. Do you have a photograph of that you can show us? Not here, no. Okay, well then, can you point us to something? Miss Abramson says, well, Your Honor, I'm going to object as misleading the witness. Counsel has the photograph. Court says, objection overruled. Are you kidding me? Okay. Your next question, please, he says. Mr. Khan says, okay. Can you point to anything in Dr. Golden's reports, either the 89 report or the 95 report, which identifies an exit wound for the 6 pellet defects to the antecubital fossa of the right arm? Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. Calls for hearsay, no foundation for that question. The court says, all right, you're referring to the report itself? Mr. Khan says, yes, Your Honor. Court says, what's written in the report? Mr. Khan says, yes. Overruled. The witness says, should I answer it, Your Honor? Yes, he says. The witness says, I misunderstood. I'm sorry. We've been over this about 20 minutes ago, as I recall. Mr. Khan says, I don't think so, doctor. Can you refer to something in the report which specifically indicates that there's an exit wound for that wound I'm directing your attention to? Objection, argumentative, move to strike counsel's comments. Overruled. The witness says, we did talk about 20 minutes ago about wounds that were included in the initial report that were then inadvertently not included in the amendment. So he's like, dude, we did talk about it. I'm telling you we did. Mr. Khan says one of the wounds that was inadvertently, or one wound, was included in the original wound, which was not included in the amendment. Is that correct? Yes. And that is the wound to the dorsal aspect of the right forearm. Is that correct? Of the exit wound? Yes. So, are you telling us that the exit wound to that the pellet defects on the dorsal aspect of the right forearm is the exit wound to the 6 pellet defects near the antecubital fossa of the right arm? There are several pellet defects on the dorsal aspect, and some of them would be lined up with these as entrances. The one in the antecubital fossa, yes. The one in the antecubital would be in the entrance, and the exit is in the dorsal aspect. Yes. Now, is there anywhere in Dr. Golden's report, either the 89 report or the 95 report, that supports the conclusion you're now telling us about? I thought we covered this 20 minutes ago, but I'll go over it again. Be my guest, doctor. There's a pause in the proceedings. The witness says, yes. Here we have on page 5, undershot number 3, that's located in the dorsal aspect of the right arm, quote, from 14.5 to 18 inches below the top of the right shoulder, multiple individual pellet wounds averaging approximately a quarter inch in diameter. All have marginal brown abrasions. There it is. He's like, you don't believe me? I'm going to find it for you. Mr. Khan says, there what is? You asked where the exit wounds were, and I'm pointing them out to you. I asked you where in Golden's report. Well, I just read it to you. Doctor, let me finish the question. I'm asking you where in Dr. Golden's report he indicates that the ones on the dorsal aspect of the right forearm are the exit wounds to the wounds that appear in the antecubital fossa of the right arm. Oh, he may have not referred to them as exit wounds. He refers to them as individual wounds. He actually, I think that's why he changed the report, because he has this listed on page 5 under shotgun wound number 3, and that may be why, one of the reasons that he made the amendment, because he describes these individual wounds, which are on the dorsal aspect of the right forearm. He actually, right here, they're described very clearly if you look at wound number 3 on page 5. This dude knows the evidence. He knows that report better than this attorney, apparently. Mr. Khan says, yes, the wounds are described very clearly here. That's what you're telling us, doctor? Yes. Do you understand that my question is, where does Dr. Golden ever say that wounds to the dorsal aspect are exit wounds to another wound? I don't think he does. Okay, all right. So he does not. Not that you don't think he does not. Is that correct? Objection, argumentative. Court says, rephrase the question. Mr. Khan says, yes. Does Dr. Golden anywhere in his report describe the wound to the dorsal aspect of the right forearm as being an exit wound? No. And you said that the reason why you believe he changed his report was to clarify that issue? That, uh, hold on, I just lost my place. Sorry. That may be one of the reasons. I don't know. There probably were multiple reasons. And yet, when he changed the report, he didn't account for the wound to the dorsal aspect of the right forearm in any way, did he? Objection, argumentative, asked and answered. Overruled. The witness says, we've been over this 20 minutes ago. Mr. Khan says, he deleted them. Yes, as we discussed and mentioned several times, he deleted this. Yes. Now, we'll get back to my original question, which was the conclusion of yours that the entry wounds, the entry pellet defects on the antecubital fossa of the right forearm is associated with the exit wounds on the dorsal aspect of the right arm. Is that confirmed anywhere in the reports of Dr. Golden? Objection calls for hearsay. The court says referring just to the reports. Mr. Khan says yes. Overruled, you can answer the question. The witness says, okay, not in the sense that he calls them exit wounds. However, he does describe wounds there, but he doesn't specifically say they're exit wounds. Correct. Yes. Mr. Khan says he makes no association in either the 1989 report or the 95 report to those two sets of wounds, does he, doctor? No. Okay, so this is your theory. Is that correct? Yes, I think I lined them up and it seemed to be reasonable. Have you not been saying that this association of wounds is not just your theory, but it is something that is reflected in the reports of Dr. Golden? Objection, argumentative, misstates the testimony. Overruled, of course. The witness says, I don't recall saying that. Mr. Khan says, okay, your conclusion then that the wounds to the antecubital fossa are associated to the wounds to the dorsal aspect of the right forearm. Is that based upon anything more than looking at the photographs and concluding that that's one possibility? Well, of course, that's what I did. Maybe that's one possibility. It didn't relate to any other thing in this whole case. It's minutia, and I didn't give a great deal of thought to it. It seemed reasonable. I said, yeah, that's probably where they came out because that's what's described there. That conclusion, associating those two sets of wounds, was not something that you included in your report, did you? I don't recall I did. Where in my report did I say that? That's my point. Well, object to counsel's comment and move to strike. Rephrase the question. That wasn't a question. He should have absolutely struck that. What a bias jerk. I'm just gonna say jerk. That's not the word that I was thinking, but I'll let you guys decide what I was thinking. He says rephrase the question. Mr. Khan says yes. Can you point to a place in your report where you said that? No. So, I don't recall saying that in my report. Okay, can you tell us when you first concluded that those two wounds were associated? No, I don't remember when I first concluded because I've been looking at the important points of this case, and this is a minutia that has no application to anything that I can see. And I don't recall giving a great deal of thought to it because this is an extremely complicated case and there are many other things that really require one's attention. And if I don't mention it, this is the reason I didn't mention it, is because I considered it minutia, basically unimportant. So why are we even wasting our time and the jury's time and the court's time with this? Now, could it have been vice versa? The wounds entered the dorsal aspect of the right arm and exited in the antecubital fossa. I think that's a possibility. Is it possible that the pellet defects in the antecubital fossa of the right forearm may have been the entry wounds for an exit that was in the upper arm, the wounds that constituted the large, ragged defects? I think that's most unlikely. Did you find in your review of Dr. Golden's report of 1989 that he said that that was a possibility? As I testified about 15 minutes ago on his reports of wounds 2 and 3, after several rereadings of it, I ended up very confused because I couldn't tell exactly what he was trying to say. Right. And you were confused because Dr. Golden, when you compare his 1989 report to his 95 report, it appears to contradict himself and leaves things out, doesn't he? Well, that's why they didn't call him then. And but this is the guy who did the autopsy in this case and they're discrediting him. And don't you think that maybe your case would be stronger if you had a better witness and you weren't discrediting the person who did the autopsy in the case? I don't know. Just a thought. His answer is, well, he appears to, in certain areas, delete things, contradict things. And he describes wounds in 89, which he no longer describes in 95. Is that correct? Miss Abramson says, Your Honor, this was asked and answered. Sustained. Finally. So, how reliable did you find this 89 report, or how reliable did you find the reports of Dr. Golden altogether? I find reports of Dr. Golden above average for the forensic pathology reports that I came across. Uh huh. Despite all those errors that you pointed out? Yes, I think you're overlooking the fact that this is an extremely complicated case because of the number of shots. Does the complexity of this case explain why Dr. Golden described wounds in 89 that he no longer describes in 95? Your Honor, I'm going to object. Calls for speculation. Sustained. Now, you say that in addition to reviewing all of the photographs in this case, you also reviewed photos taken by Dr. Morton of clothing. Is that correct? A photo taken by Dr. Morton? Ms. Amerson says, I'm going to object. There is no Dr. Morton. The court says, Mr. Morton. Mr. Khan says, Mr. Morton. The witness says he furnished me with 2 test targets that he fired. Did you see any photographs of clothing? The clothing photographs? If he's the one that took those, yes. I didn't recall who took. I've seen some photographs of clothing. I don't know who took them. And what items of clothing did you see photographs of? The scene photographs show the victims dressed and they have clothing on. Those are the ones I'm speaking of. The crime scene photographs. Yeah, crime scene photographs, yes. And you read trial transcripts? Which trial transcripts? That's what I'm asking you. Did you read some trial transcripts? Some. This trial you're speaking of or the previous trial? But did you read any trial transcripts in this case? Yes. Your Honor, I'm going to object to the question as vague. Overruled, the answer will stand. Yes, can you tell us whose transcripts you read? In this case? Yes. Dr. Lawrence and Mr. McCarthy. I didn't read all of, as I have answered previously, I didn't read all of Mr. McCarthy's because I was en route and I missed at least one day. So you did not read Dr. Golden's testimony, is that correct? No, I did not. He testified in the first trial. That has never been provided to you by defense counsel in this case. I don't recall if it has or not. I don't recall reading it, no. Did you ever ask to review it? His testimony in this case you're speaking of? Yes. I don't believe so. Did you read his testimony in another case? No, I'm just asking. I think he might have testified in the previous case. I was wondering if that's what you're referring to. In the previous trial you're referring to? Yes. Did you read his testimony from the first trial? Why did that take so long to get to the question? No, I didn't read anything from the first trial. Did you ever ask for that testimony? No. Did you ever ask why it was not provided to you? No. Do you think it would be important to read it? It may have been provided to me and I may have read it. I just don't recall if I have. I don't think I have. You felt that it was important to speak to Dr. Golden. Yes, I spoke to Dr. Golden, sure. You felt it was not important to read his testimony. I thought it would be better to speak to him, but no, I didn't consider I considered speaking to him more important, if you want to know. Yes. Speaking to him was more important than finding out what he testified to under oath in this trial? Certainly. Objection, argumentative, overruled. The answer will stand. Why would that be? Certainly true, sir. Because I wanted to talk to him about certain shots. You didn't want to know what opinions he expressed when he testified in the first trial. He gave a full report on everything, so if he really needed to know what he felt about these wounds, he could have read the reports. As I say, I wanted to speak to him about certain shots, and I asked him about those shots, so he had specific questions he wanted to know. I didn't know if certain questions, it would be unlikely that questions that I wanted to ask him would have been asked in exactly the same fashion in the trial. That's a very good point. That is a very good point. Because an attorney may ask a question, but it might not be the question that he's trying to get to. It might not answer exactly what he's trying to get to. And as you can see, it takes layers upon layers of questioning sometimes just to get to the right question. So for him, it's like, I got my questions in mind. I'm just going to ask the dude instead of trying to sift through his thoughts laid out by an attorney. You know what I mean? So that's a really good point. Moving on. And that I would be able to get the information there and not have to speak to him. I thought speaking to him was a much better way of having him expand his answers, and it's a much easier discourse than reading trial transcripts. And you think that it would be a good starting point to find out where he testified to under oath? You didn't think it would be a good starting point to find out what he testified to under oath? I didn't think of it, no. Did you review the original x-rays in this case? I believe I asked for the x-rays in this case and I was told that they had been destroyed and we only had microfiche, and I asked if I could have them reconstructed for microfiche, and I was provided a set of x-rays that I was told had been reconstructed for microfiche, and that's what I reviewed. Yes, you were told that the x-rays in this case were destroyed by the coroner's office. Is that correct? I don't believe anybody told me who destroyed them, but it was told that they had been destroyed. That's what I was told. So that's all he knew. They were gone. And did you review photographs taken by the coroner's office of the body of Jose Menendez? Yes. How many? Oh, there must have been about 20. Some of them were not very useful because the exposure. They were very light, I guess overexposed, and you couldn't see much. Are you sure those were taken by the coroner's office as opposed to the Beverly Hills Police Department? No, I'm not. I thought those were the ones you were speaking of. Okay. Were you told that the coroner's office destroyed the photographs in this case too? No, I was not. Ms. Amerson says, I'm going to object to that, Your Honor. That lacks foundation. There's no evidence of that. Overruled. Wow. And then she says, well, it misstates. The court says it was a question and he gave his answer. Mr. Khan says, did you prepare any reports other than this 3-page report that counsel provided to you just a short time ago? Did you prepare that counsel provided to you? She provided his own report to him, I guess. I don't know. I think this is the only one, although I may have sent another shorter one, but I think this is the only one. I don't recall really. When you say you think you submitted or sent a shorter one, I might have. When do you think you might have sent that? I don't recall. What makes you think that you might have sent a shorter one? I just don't know. I was asked sometime in maybe June or July about this case, and I was sent some information, and a long time went by, and I didn't get any information. And then I actually, at one point, came out here and spent a day, and then that was during the pretrial hearing, or was there a pretrial hearing on Mr. McCarthy's testimony or something of the sort? Before you come to court, sir, do you commonly review reports associated with cases you're working on? Yes. And did you feel that you had an adequate time to review all of the autopsy reports before you testified? Yeah, I've reviewed the autopsy reports before I testified. And you had all those wounds straight in your mind before you took the stand today? No, I can't possibly keep them all straight in my head. That's why I have these 2 autopsy reports before me. Did you decide that you were going to testify as a witness in this case, and you prepared an earlier report and thought it might be a good idea for you to review the earlier report before you testified? Objection, argumentative, sustained. Did you review any of your own reports before testifying? Yes, I reviewed the one that I have in my hand here, but I have been in conversations with counsel in response to the transcripts that I have been provided. We have spent a lot of time on the telephone, and that's been a constant review of the various points, most of which are included here. So I really didn't see any reason to sit down and read over everything I said here because we had really been constantly going over most of these issues. So he was already well prepared. Did you ask yourself whether you had written an earlier report before you testified in this case? I did not. Is there any way you can ascertain whether you provided counsel with another report in addition to the one before you? I can go back and look on my computer and see if I did. Like, what is he getting at? What does he have proof that there was some other report, or he's just insinuating that this guy is, or that the defense is holding back on evidence? All right. Now, you graduated from medical school in 1959. Is that correct? Yes. And you were in the military for 31 years? That's right. What year did you become an officer in the United States Army? Oh, in the Army or in the Navy? Were you in the Army first? No, I was in the Army second. All right, what year did you become an officer in the Navy? I was appointed an ensign in the Navy and in a reserve program in about 1957 while I was in medical school. So you were assigned to the medical corps without your entire medical career, or throughout your entire medical career? That's correct. And you served in the Vietnam War as well? Yes, I did. And how much time did you serve in Vietnam? 1 year and 1 day. You were a career medical officer? Yes. And you only served 1 year in Vietnam? Yes, that was the standard. Medical officers served 1 year in Vietnam. That was what everybody served. How long did the Vietnam War last? Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. Sustained. Like, he just said it is standard, and that's what they do. And he's trying to diminish his time served or something. Like, dude served 31 years in the Army and Navy combined. And you're trying to be like, well, you were only in Vietnam a year. So clearly your service means nothing. What? Okay. How long did the Vietnam War last? Okay, objection sustained. Did you participate in any of the armed conflicts or in combat duty? No, no, I did not. During the time that you were in the combat zones, what were your primary responsibilities? Well, my primary responsibilities during the first 20 years of my service were that of, well, starting out, it was my military career included my residency training. So it was 4 years of general surgery, which was a full training in general surgery, followed by 4 years of plastic surgery, which is a full training in plastic surgery. My duties were to learn these various specialties, and then after I finished the residency training, I asked to go to a duty station where I could become current in trauma surgery, and Da Nang was the preference I had given because that was the hospital, I think that was the Vietnam hospital, in the Navy that was the most active. We had two hospital ships also there. Probably like, uh, what are those huge ships called? I can't think of them. Never mind. But the shore base hospital saw many more casualties than the ships. So I asked to go where I could get the most casualties. My duty there was as a trauma surgeon, no administrative duties or anything. And then 3 years in Yokosuka, Japan. Immediately after that, my duties were that of a surgeon treating combat casualties shortly after they were hit. And then when I went to Memphis, Tennessee, I had my first administrative duties added to my surgical duties, and that was I was chief of the Department of Surgery at the Naval Hospitals in Memphis. And subsequent to that, I was a chief of the Department of Surgery and Landstuhl Army Hospital, but while I had administrative duties in the Department of Surgery, I continued to operate as a surgeon. And that continued until I accepted the assignment in 81 to take a research assignment setting up and running the wound ballistics program at the Letterman Army Institute, where on paper, my entire duty was research. However, I had an agreement with the Army that if I would take that research assignment, I would be allowed to use 1/4 of my time to help residents operate at the Letterman Army Hospital, which was right next door, although they had no administrative claim to me. I was under the Medical Research and Development Command, who was my parent command, and who allowed me the time to do that because they knew that surgeons like to continue operating. So I continued operating part time as a general in plastic surgery up until about 89 when the demand of the research job became such that I just really didn't have the time to keep up my duties as general surgeon, and so I stopped operating at that time and just did research from then on. That was a long-winded answer, but it gives you a good idea that he's not just some quack. Like he's a doctor trained by the military, and he's done trauma surgeries and his wound ballistics. He's done years and years of research and continued his education and training and continued practicing operating. So he's, yeah, definitely the real deal. Anyway, next question. From that year, you started doing just research about 1989. And where was it that you have experience in treating large numbers of shotgun wounds? I don't have experience treating large numbers of shotgun wounds. No one does. What do you mean, no one does? Because there are not large numbers of shotgun wounds. The average, I would estimate that of the wounds either treated or seen by medical examiners would probably be about 93% handgun wounds, about 6% shotgun wounds, and about 1% rifle wounds. So only medical professionals only see about 6% shotgun wounds. Those just, well, at least in 1995. So these statistics you get from where? That's a compilation of various statistics starting with the FBI Uniform Crime Report. Yeah, take that, buddy. That's the FBI saying that, which is the most reliable, of course. Of course. Well, what are your own statistics for treating shotgun wounds? My own statistics of treating shotgun wounds? Yes. I haven't treated enough shotgun wounds. I have not kept my own statistics on the treatment of shotgun wounds, gunshot wounds. You didn't see too many shotgun wounds when you were in Vietnam, did you? No, I did not. Mossbergs were not the weapon of choice for the enemy in Vietnam, was it? No. The Marine officers had the option of carrying a shotgun. I know several that did, but I never saw any wounded as a result of it. So you didn't see any shotgun wounds in Vietnam. I don't recall seeing a single shotgun wound. As I stated earlier, 80% of what we saw was explosive device wounds, which are very similar to shotgun wounds in that they're caused by multiple individual fragments. So if anybody has the experience or knowledge, it would be this guy because he's seen the explosive devices that have wounds similar to shotgun wounds. So he probably is one of the more qualified people to be speaking on this. That entails different size shrapnel. It could be large pieces, could be small pieces. Is that correct? Yeah. There were various size pieces of shrapnel, certainly. It could also involve multiple objects hitting a person in all different parts of the body. Excuse me? Explosive devices could involve multiple objects striking a person in all different parts of his body. Is that correct? Well, we just mentioned in the previous question, we said, doesn't shrapnel come in various sizes? I answered that. Now, I understand. I didn't understand. Objects from different sources. It could involve multiple sources, multiple objects, rather than a single explosive device. Is that correct? You mean several explosive devices at the same time simultaneously? I don't understand your question. When an explosive device explodes, it could blow away various items that are on top of the explosive device as well. Is that correct? I see what you mean. And would in fact these also possibly cause some damage? Yes, that's a possibility. All right. So when you say that you treated injuries from explosive devices, it's not exactly like a shotgun wound, is it? Not exactly like a shotgun wound? Well, I'm not sure what you mean, not exactly like a shotgun wound. The similarities include multiple projectiles and the fact that the projectiles lose velocity as they increase distance, and the fact that they spread farther apart as they increase distance, so they have very many similarities. Now, they are not exactly alike because the shotgun wounds might be visualized as, say, a small segment of an explosive device wound rather than the entire thing. You're just taking a few of the projectiles. So, in that way, they're very, very similar. Not exactly alike. No. That was a great, I mean, Got a little confusing there at the end, but it was a good way to explain that, I thought, um, to counter that point that he made by his question. All right, so do you hold yourself out to be a shotgun expert, a shotgun wound expert, because you treated shrapnel wounds? I don't believe I've ever held myself out to be a shotgun wound expert, as I hold myself out to be an expert on wound ballistics, which includes the penetrating projectiles from any source. I have also, that could have been arrows. So, not just shotguns, arrows, any kind of projectile. And how many shotgun wounds have you treated in the course of your career? Can't tell you because probably no more than half a dozen. So, in your entire 30 years as a doctor, you've treated no more than half a dozen? Probably. I don't really keep those statistics. That's probably true. You don't see very many of them. In the ones that you do see, well, they are usually at a distance. If you have shotgun wounds that are up close, they can be very deadly, and therefore I wouldn't be treating them because you must recall I'm a surgeon. If a person is killed with a wound, I'd never see them. And the ones that most commonly get shotgun injuries are from a great distance where you'd only see a few birdshot pellets, meaning the people that you would see coming in as a patient, they wouldn't be severely injured. It would have been from a distance and they were only maybe slightly injured versus what you saw with Kitty and Jose was, multiple shotgun blasts that made many, many injuries on the body. And obviously they didn't survive. So a person who treats wounds isn't going to see that. They're going to be taken to the morgue, not to a hospital for treatment. So I mean, duh. It's a good point to bring up to to remind the jury of the process and how things work. Logic. All right, so now, of that kind, I've seen probably more in those, but I really didn't include those because when I interpreted your question, when you say treated, I assumed a wound that was serious enough to cause a patient to come into the hospital, and I would treat him as an inpatient. That was about a half a dozen. If we could include just individual pellet wounds that I have seen and, put a band aid on and give the person penicillin and tell him to come back later, there are more. You were right about that. I wasn't referring to that. I was referring to the half dozen that you have treated. Can you tell us a little bit about your expertise in those 6 areas? My expertise? Yes. Objection, vague. Sustained. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in regarding to treating those 6 people? Objection, vague. The witness says, it was a very long time ago and I have difficulty remembering them. And then the court says the objection is sustained. You may ask your next question. Mr. Khan says, when you say it's been a very long time, when was the last time that you treated a person with shotgun wounds? Probably in Germany. That was in what year? Let me see. I was there from 75 to 85. Sometime during that 5-year period, but I really can't tell you any more exactly than that when because there were hunters in Germany and our forces tended to hunt. Actually, I now recall the last time I was involved in treating shotgun wound, although I wasn't the primary surgeon, I was advisor on the case. Actually, it was a shot that occurred while I was running the wound ballistics lab. This occurred at the Letterman Army Hospital, and this was a case where a 20 gauge shotgun with number 6 bird shot was fired at a distance of approximately 2 to 3 feet and entered an upper arm of a full grown adult and went through, just missing the bone, now breaking the bone with temporary cavitation. Since it was medial to the bone, it actually destroyed the artery, and what we had to do was take a vein from the person's leg and replace the artery and stabilize the bone. But I remember that case very specifically because it was a case where a short range shotgun blast had broken a major bone by temporary cavitation, and that was approximately 1988 at the Letterman Army Hospital. So take that, Mr. Khan. And I just want to say wounds haven't changed over time. So whether he treated them yesterday or 3 years ago, however many years ago, this would be what, uh, 8 years ago. It really doesn't matter. Shotgun wounds are not going to change over that period of time. So this line of questioning is just disingenuous. So he says, yeah, 1988, I guess, was the last time. Ms. Abramson says, 17? The witness says, 88. No, that's not 17 years. Mr. Khan says, 88, about 7 years ago. Yes. Oh, that's a big deal. Big off. And then the time before that was in Germany, about somewhere between 15 to 20 years ago. And that's about right, yeah. And what type of wound was that? A hunting wound where the distance was, it's very difficult to know the exact distance, but again, it was birdshot, and we admitted a person that might have been treated as an outpatient, but they were close enough so that I think we actually excised a little bit of skin, but we didn't have to do any major kind of operation. We put the patient in the hospital and put him on antibiotics and kept him maybe a week. I'm not exactly sure how long. That was a very minor wound. It was not a major wound, one that required a visit to an operating room with a major general anesthetic. So you were not surprised that the person did not tell you how much pain he was in, is that correct? Can you restate the question, please? So you were not surprised when that person did not tell you about how much pain he was in as a result of the wound. Objection, argumentative, sustained. What other wounds do you recall? Shotgun wounds do you recall working on in the course of your career? Well, there were several at Memphis when I was there. Again, as I was saying, it's even a longer time ago. And it's very dim in my memory, but we had several shotgun wounds, and I don't believe I was the primary surgeon. I was the chief of the Department of Surgery. And since I was fully trained in plastic surgery, because many times surgeons would ask me to consult on wounds, and I recall there was one that there was a problem with. I think we might have referred this for reconstruction. It was an attempted suicide that failed, and this is the kind of wound that is fairly common fairly common with a shotgun. Again, it's because of the layman's misconception on movement of the anatomy. Many persons that try to commit suicide with a shotgun will put the barrel of the shotgun under the chin and try to shoot themselves in the head this way. And commonly, when they go to pull the trigger, as they have the gun here, they tend to lean in order to reach the trigger. They lean and tend to tilt the head back. So, what happened was the shot comes up and destroyed the face. And when you take the nose and many parts of the face away, and then these patients very typically do not die, but require multiple operations, and plastic surgeons get heavily involved in this. And I think this was a soldier that we referred downtown to the university. I did not do the entire reconstruction of this patient. We evaluated him initially, as this is a kind of wound that I have seen much of. I've seen much of. It seems that every place I would get a talk, someone would have a case of such, and show me the slides because it's a very common wound. And any other shotgun cases that you recall working on? I can't recall the details of any more. So you recall the details of 3 shotgun cases that you worked on? Approximately, yeah. Did I say 3? Yeah, the ones I talked about. So I take it that you have not written any publications concerning shotgun wounds, is that correct? Well, not entirely. The chapter Missile Caused Wounds in the Current, which is the 1988 edition of the Emergency War Surgery, the NATO manual, has a photograph of my wound profile of number 4 buckshot, and I have explained in the text the usefulness of this because of its parallelism to the fragmenting devices that the combat surgeon gets involved with. And so, I have written about it in that sense, and probably have written 1 or 2 other cases, maybe in one of the book chapters I've written. I know I have it there, and I know I have the wound profile. That's one. I can't recall any other specifically, but if you look through my CV, there may be 1 or 2 others. What do you mean by wound profile? Wound profile is what we have put the use when we calibrated the ordnance gelatin to have the same resistance as animal tissue. Then we would take given projectiles of various kinds and shoot them into blocks of ordnance gelatin and catch the entire projectile path. And then we would cut the gelatin first. First thing we would do is X-ray the block of in case in if there was any fragmentation. Certain ones we didn't have to X-ray the block because it was obvious there was no fragmentation. If there was fragmentation of the bullet, in order to define the fragment spread, we would X-ray. We would take measurements of the temporary cavity. We could measure because the temporary cavity makes a radial split and you can measure it, and it gives you a quantitative size of the temporary cavity. And so I would take all of these measurements and make a rough drawing, scale drawing, and give it to our artist at the Letterman Army Institute, and he would make me a final copy, which was essentially a graph like depiction of the thighs were all life size, depictions of how deeply this projectile would penetrate, and the shotgun, how deeply each fragment would penetrate, and these have been widely used. I published them many, many places. We had, I think we're up to, I think about 27 individual different kinds of projectiles that we have wound profiles of, and I've used these widely in my publication. What type of projectiles did you study? Well, all types of projectiles. We studied rifle wounds of the military type, rifle wounds of the buckshot type, shotgun wounds of birdshot, number 4 buckshot, and number 0 buckshot, and several kinds of rifled slugs. We've also used almost every kind of handgun in both the military configuration where it's a jacketed handgun bullet and also a hollow point or expanding handgun bullet. We study those. In addition, we have several experimental types of. I had a large round ball shot from the shotgun in which I lowered the velocity 540 feet per second. And we have the wound profile of that. We have the wound profile of small spheres of steel fired at about 3,000 feet per second. And I guess that's about all. I added the sigh for effect. The experiments that you concluded shootings into pigs, I take it they were live pigs? They were live, anesthetized pigs. Did you shoot shotgun pellets into the pig or just other type projectiles? I don't think I ever shot a shotgun in a living pig or in a live pig. In addition to the live pigs, we used for certain purposes freshly killed pigs. At our institute, we had other researchers, and one of the research groups was studying hemodynamic shock, which is the effect of loss of blood on the battlefield, and they were using smaller pigs. They were using 100-pound pigs. So they would finish an experiment. The standard way of destroying a pig when you get done with it is you give the pig an injection with a sedative and then add a lethal injection, essentially. So, you have never done any research into the effects of cavitation by firing shotgun pellets into animals? No, we've gotten cavitation from the gelatin, which we calibrated against animal tissue, and I've calibrated the cavitation also in we don't have in order to calibrate this in animals, it is somewhat difficult because it requires very expensive high-speed X-rays, which has an exposure time of 2 microseconds. I visited the British Army ballistics lab at Porton Down, England, and they were kind enough to shoot the thighs of 4 living pigs for me and take the size of the temporary cavity for me. And then I went back home and took the same projectiles that I used in England and I loaded them in my laboratory to the same speed. And then I calibrated this with my gelatin and found out that the measuring of our temporary cavity by the cracks was within about 10% of the size that it got in the actual animal. We have calibrated it in living animals. Perhaps this would be a good time for a break, Your Honor. The court says, all right, you still have your other witness here. Miss Abramson says, yes, I do, Your Honor, and I was. The court says, let's see if we can work until 12:15 and see if we can continue on. Miss Abramson says, Your Honor, could I just have 2 minutes to be excused if we're going to work till 12:15? The court says, 1 minute. Ms. Abramson says, this is the girls, they take twice as long. The court says, there's no line, probably. Ms. Abramson says, I'll be right back. There was a brief pause in the proceedings. The court says, okay, we'll continue. We might try working a little later this evening beyond 4:30 if that's going to create any need by anybody to make phone calls to make some adjustments in your arrangements. Perhaps you can do it during the lunch hour as well. And if there's a problem, let the bailiff know and we'll talk about it later on. All right, you may continue. Miss Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Khan says, directing your attention back to the wound to the right arm of Jose Menendez. You said that the entry to the inner forearm of Jose Menendez to the antecubital fossa exiting out the dorsal aspect of his forearm. Can you tell us what was the distance that that shot was fired from? From the pattern spread, it appears that there are very little pellets, so it's very difficult to say, but the pattern spread, I would give a rough estimate of maybe 14 feet, 12 or 14 feet. Does that also come with the same plus or minus 4 feet? Yes. So this plus or minus 4 feet, where did you get that from? Is it based upon some reason? No, it's based on an estimate because we cannot estimate these things exactly, and rather than saying approximate and leaving it at that, I'd like to give you some kind of a more exact estimate. I think we can say it would be between that range, and most likely the middle of the range. And when you say plus or minus 4, can you tell us why you say plus or minus as opposed to plus or minus 3 or 5? No, I just picked it out of my head. We can say 3 if you wish. I think 4 is more. Is there what you call a scientific way you just figure it out in your head? Miss Abramson says objection, argumentative, sustained. Mr. Khan says the shot to the back of the right arm of Jose Menendez. Can you tell us how far away that shot was fired from? That one came from much closer. I would estimate probably 3 feet or 4 feet. The wound to the left cheek of Kitty Menendez, would you agree that this is a contact wound? Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is beyond the scope of direct. I called, the court says overruled. The witness says it gives every appearance of being contact. The wound that entered the right eye area and nose area of Kitty Menendez, how far was that fired from? And that's very difficult to say. That would appear to me, because of the flattening of the projectile of the front wall of the sinus, it appeared to me that that wound had to go through something first. So I don't think that it's a primary wound. I think that's a wound that has passed through something first. The wound to the collarbone, to the right collarbone of Kitty Menendez, also called the clavicle. Do you associate that wound with the wound to the right jaw or mandible of Kitty Menendez? Probably. I think it's very difficult to say for sure, but most likely she would have had her head in the position that would have lined them up. Do you also associate the hand wound from Kitty Menendez with those two wounds? Objection vague. The court says you understand what he's referring to? Yes, I do, Your Honor. Okay, you can answer the question. The witness says, it may well be associated with that. I don't associate it with that because I haven't really tried to. I have not myself tried to make a total reconstruction of this case, and it may well have been there. It may not. I don't know. It could be, or it might not have been. Doctor, you told us that no reconstruction in this case is possible. Is that correct? What you're saying? That's right. I'm trying to reiterate that I'm not trying to do a reconstruction, and it seems to me you're trying to lead me into one. Doctor, did you try to see what conclusions, if any, you can draw from the crime scene, given the fact that when it comes to distance, you can pin it down pretty good, can't you? Objection, argumentative. The court says also compound. Mr. Khan says, in light of the fact that you have a pretty good estimate, in light of the fact that you have an estimate of the entrance, did you feel that that would be a piece of information for which you have even more information than Dr. McCarthy, that you might be able to make some progress towards reconstruction in this case? Objection, compound. Overruled. I don't understand the question. Did I try to make some progress? I never tried making a reconstruction in this case. I don't know how much clearer he can be about that. Okay. And so you reached the conclusion that a reconstruction was not possible before you ever tried to do a reconstruction. Is that what you're saying? Well, I don't think I reached this conclusion. That really is not my thought process. Just looking at the situation where you have two shooters and two victims and this number of shots, I don't have to think very hard to know that any one reconstruction cannot be done with any great degree of certainty. So you said there's just too many variables here, so I'm not even going to try. Well, I didn't see any reason to try because I knew that anything, there would be many, many ways of lining up things and we would end up going around in a circle forever. And so I see absolutely no reason, and I have resisted trying to do a reconstruction for that very reason. Why have you resisted trying to do a reconstruction? Because I don't think I can do one accurately, and any that I might do would potentially mislead the jury into error. So basically, he's also stating in that sentence those failure analysis diagrams are potentially misleading to the jury. So do you recall that you might be able to do so with the help of others? No, I don't. Looking at the crime scene, did you feel with your medical background that you can conclude that all of the shots were fired at Kitty and Jose Menendez while they were in the immediate vicinity or where their bodies were found? What is immediate vicinity? How many feet? Jose Menendez, you understand, was found sitting on the sofa. Is that correct? That's my understanding. Yes. And Kitty Menendez was found lying on the floor in between the sofa and the coffee table. Is that correct? And that's my understanding. Yes. And there was one large pool of blood underneath Jose Menendez. Is that correct? Objection, Your Honor. There's been no such testimony. Court says rephrase the question. Yes. Well, doctor, on this photograph that is up on the board here that counsel marked this morning as 319, photograph number A, that's a photograph which is marked A, and it shows a pool of blood underneath the area where Jose Menendez was found. Is that correct? I wouldn't describe it as a pool, but there is a widespread blood in that area, yes. Okay, all right. And have you seen photographs of the body of Kitty Menendez removed from the crime scene? Yes. And would you say that there was a pool of blood in that area where the body of Kitty was found? I'm going to object, Your Honor. The witness says there was a lot. The court says, what's the legal objection? Ms. Abramson says, it's calling for speculation. Overruled. The witness says there was a lot of blood in that area. Yes. Mr. Khan says, and aside from those two areas which you categorize as having a lot of blood, did you see a lot of blood in any other areas of the family room or that den? Not any blood that approaches the magnitude of those to this extent, no. In light of your medical background, would that assist you in determining that all of those shots must have happened very close to those two areas? Objection calls for speculation. Overruled. The witness says, I wish you would restate it. I didn't quite understand the whole. Mr. Khan says, in light of your medical background, does the fact that all of the blood, most of the blood, was found in just those two spots in the room, would that assist you in determining whether the shooting occurred just in those two areas or not? No, it wouldn't. And tell us why not. Well, because when multiple shots occur, there does not, in the first place, many gunshot wounds bleed very little. Uh-huh. And people could easily be moving around, and when they do have wounds that are going to bleed, when they come to rest and they remain at a particular place for a long period of time, when that would be the place where the blood would accumulate, it doesn't mean someone would have been shot in another room, lie down, and the blood would appear there, rather than where he or she was shot. Uh-huh. So it really doesn't assist. No. It doesn't help you at all in pinning down the possible reconstruction of the crime scene? Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'm going to object as calling for speculation given the witness's testimony. The court says you're referring to the two areas of blood that have been described earlier? Yes. Overruled. You can answer the question. The witness says, Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I've forgotten. No. Mr. Khan says that doesn't help you at all. The fact that the majority of the blood is confined just to those two spots in the den doesn't assist you at all in formulating reconstruction of the scene of the crime. As I've said on multiple occasions, I never try to formulate a reconstruction. It wouldn't assist me in something I wasn't trying to do. Okay, the wound to the right arm of Kitty Menendez, that is to the right forearm. Do you associate that wound to the wound to her right upper arm? Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is beyond the scope of the witness's testimony. Overruled. Ms. Abramson says, could we approach on this issue, Your Honor? No. Wow. The witness says, what was the question? Mr. Khan says, do you associate the wound to the right forearm of Kitty Menendez with the wound to her right upper arm? I haven't really thought much of it. Well, you've read the reports of Dr. Golden, haven't you? Uh-huh. And you've spent what were you doing those 50 hours, by the way? I was going over these things. I was talking on the phone and traveling and looking at a lot of photographs and reading a lot of transcripts, but this is not a wound that I read what was written about this wound and I didn't see any glaring errors that I would worry about. So it's not something that I spent any time trying to reconstruct. When you say that you wouldn't worry about it, what do you mean by that phrase? I mean, when I looked at photographs of that wound and I read someone say, well, I think this might be associated with this. If we move the arm and put it in this position, maybe those two were associated. I said, okay, maybe they're associated. He's worked it out. And I don't have any problem with that. I agree with that. So you don't have if someone says, I have a wound here and it's associated with a wound in the buttock, uh-huh, then I can disagree with that because there's no way that you can get your hand back to the buttock. Then I'll say, hey, there's something I have to find out why he said that, and that's wrong. That's something that would be called to my attention, but otherwise, if this is associated with the other wound or not, yes, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's not something that I would be concentrating on because I'm concentrating on other things. It's not really relevant whether it is or isn't associated. In this case, there was no one who was associating a wound to the right arm or the right hand with a wound to the buttock, was there? No, I just used that as a ridiculous example to try to make a point. I understood that. And because to the question, or in getting back to the question that I asked you, do you have any disagreement with the association of the wound to the right forearm of Kitty Menendez with the wound to the right upper arm of Kitty Menendez, which was made by Dr. Golden, Dr. Lawrence, and Dr. McCarthy? Well, if you insist on me answering the question, I'm going to insist on you giving me the photographs and we'll go over it. Okay, we'll do that. The court says, all right, we'll resume at 1:30. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions, and we'll resume at 1:30. Ms. Abramson says, could we remain so I could be heard on something? The court says, certainly. So there's going to be some argument here. We will read through. So now the jury has exited the courtroom. The following proceedings were held. The court says, okay, the jury has left. Ms. Abramson says, yes, Your Honor, I've been objecting, and the court has been overruling my objections that the cross-examination of this witness is going beyond the scope of the direct. The witness is not here to serve as our coroner. He is not a forensic pathologist. We have a forensic pathologist who's going to testify and review all the wounds. I questioned Dr. Fackler about the wound in which the wound ballistics aspect best fit his expertise and which counsel starts cross-examining him about wounds that we haven't put on any evidence from this witness. I don't understand why they're being allowed to do that. The court says, because it's within the scope of the direct examination. But she just said it wasn't. She says, but it isn't. I didn't ask about those wounds. The court says, that's not, Ms. Abramson says, they're not in controversy. The court says, there's not the way I define the scope of direct examination. By counsel limiting it just to the couple or several of the wounds and excluding the others, he's talked about the entirety, a review of the entirety of the coroner's report, and he criticized the entirety of Dr. McCarthy's report or testimony. No, he hasn't. Yes, he has. Not on direct, he hasn't. The court says he has on the nature of his examination. It's purely without a doubt within the scope of his direct examination. Fine. It's not even a close question. My concern is how much. The court says, yes. Okay. how much longer counsel has, because if we're not going to get Dr. Fackler off by tomorrow, I'm going to cut him loose and have him go back to Florida tonight. I don't want to hang him up. The court says, I'm asking how much longer are you going to be? Mr. Khan says, a good part of the day. Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to cut Mr. Wecht loose. The court says, as long as you have somebody else. Ms. Abramson says, I can't be sure. The court says, get on the phone. Ms. Abramson says, we will. The court says, we will be in recess until 1:30. I don't know, guys. What do you think of Judge Weisberg in this little portion that we just read? He's kind of being a jerk and being really, I think. I mean, it's not just that he's being a jerk. Like, I really do think that he gives attitude back to Leslie, and he's disrespectful to her. He doesn't let her speak. She tries to, like, can I be heard on this? No. Like, just flat out, no. Next question. And I hate that. Like, I know judges have a right to do that or whatever, but it's rude, it's disrespectful, and it shouldn't be how courtrooms are held. How court proceedings are held. If an attorney needs to speak to the judge, even if it's in the middle of an examination, they should be allowed to do it so that the other person doesn't get into something that they shouldn't. So I don't know. I'm really feeling the bias from Judge Weisberg from today's reading. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I appreciate you guys for watching. Please hit the like button, subscribe, share, do all the YouTubey things, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.